Hello, my name is Quyen Vuong, community organizer. I love to do humanitarian work to bring social justice, and I love to strengthen the Vietnamese community via the social services.
Welcome to The Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over the world.
What does it mean to be Vietnamese to you?
I guess I was born Vietnamese to begin with. Those days that I was raised with all the stories, all the, anecdotes about my ancestors, all of that really just seeped into me. It's in the food, it's in the blood. So when I came to America at the age of 16 as a refugee, I knew who I am. I am a Vietnamese refugee.
You know, that's an interesting point you bring up about when you came from Vietnam at 16, you knew who you are, because I don't know about your children, but the kids that were kind of born here, in the 70s, were just kids when they came. There's a lot of problems with that sort of that identity issue, because at 16, you're kind of fully formed at that point, coming to the United States. You know who you are, and you know where you come from. You know why you're here in the United States.
Right.
And it plays out differently. How did it feel going through high school when you were coming at 16?
I left Vietnam almost at the end of my 11th grade, my junior year. So when I got to the States, I was supposed to start my senior year, but because I didn't know English, I was put back 3 years. So I had to start high school again. So there was a lot of crying, feeling bad. Now that, I'm the big sister, but my younger brother is in 10th grade, and then I'm in 9th grade. So all of that face issue, how could I be so bad? Was a lot of pain and adjustment. But I quickly realized that, hey, even though I'm in 9th grade, I'm teaching my younger brother how to do math because my math is better than his. So, but it was quite a lesson in, to put things in perspective, to really know who you are, because I had to keep on reminding myself that the reason I was put back in 3 years, because I told the counselor I wanted to go to college. So she said, then go back to 9th grade, build your foundation. So,
Did you know where you wanted to go to college?
I don't know. At the time, my brother got accepted. My brother came in 75, and he got accepted to Princeton. So all I know is that is a big school, and I want to go to college like him. I don't know anything else. So.
I had your sister, Jizip, on the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like Ivy League education seems like a big thing in your family.
Well, education is not so much Ivy League, because back then we didn't know anything, right? In Vietnam, we didn't know what Ivy League is about.
That's why I'm asking the question, because that's what I wondered about your family. As I read about it, it's everybody's in Ivy League schools, but it was so early in the early years that I wondered, is that something that was discussed quite a bit in your family?
I think it all started with my brother. Like the Vietnamese parents always said, the firstborn is the leader. So he got here, he got to the US in 1975 with going with an aunt's family. And so, and he found his way to Princeton, and he had sponsors and all that. And the sponsors have actually helped sponsor my dad and my sister and younger brother when they were in the camp. So they left. So my brother came in 75, Diep and Hugh, and my dad and my grandmother, Bà Nội, left in 1980, and I took a younger brother in 81. And so by the time I came here, my oldest brother was already at Princeton. And so that gave me and Diep a sense of, hey, let's go to Ivy League. Because before that, we don't know what Ivy League is about, but we came from a family that highly values education.
Yeah, I'm torn with that topic. You know, I'm obsessed with it on one hand. I talk about it quite a bit. This idea of Ivy Leagues and the East Coast in terms of education, and I feel like much later, the people that have arrived, you know, as the kids grew up in the 80s and 90s, it became more important to kind of find your footing at the bigger schools, at the more you know, how do we say it in Vietnamese? Những trường cao cảnh, right? It's the really elite schools that, you know, you graduate from these schools and it makes a huge difference in what you can do with where you're placed in society. And, you know, today we don't think of it because, you know, you can laterally move basically in your industry, even in technology. Sometimes you don't even have to go to school and still make, you know, good money. And so it's not as, I look back on the history of that sort of mindset of the Vietnamese people. And when it goes back as early as people as you that have gone to Ivy League so early on, it really blows my mind to hear about it.
Well, you know, to me at the time, honestly, I just wanted to do the best I could, right? I did the best I could in school, and then I tried out and I got accepted. So I'm happy. I remember when I went for the Yale interview, you know, they asked me, well, why do you want to go to Yale? And I'm like, honestly, I don't know the difference. I got here 4 years ago. I've never been outside of Texas. I work 30 hours a week after school to support the family. So I don't know anything. All I know is that my brother went to Princeton, my sister is at Harvard, and they constantly fight each other whose school's better. And so I want a school of my own. And he took it. I mean, that was an honest answer. So when I got accepted, I called him to thank him, and he said, congratulations, you now have your own school. So to me, that taught me that, you know, being genuine is very important, because all these alumni, you know, they are so smart. You can't pull a fast one over them, you know. It just be straightforward and be genuine.
It's pretty insane. 4 years and you get into Yale. It's what a feat. It's amazing.
Work hard.
Hard work, right?
Yeah.
And,
you know, my sister got to Harvard in 3 years.
Oh, because she came to the United States and then 3 years later she was at Harvard, you said?
Yeah.
It's unfathomable to me. You know, I grew up in a family where education was as important as becoming priest. You know, we had a long tradition of being Catholic in my family, and so my parents didn't push it. I look back and in anger sometimes, thinking about you know, my brother and I could have. Well, I think we could have made it, but we just didn't get motivated, and we were encouraged to prepare for the afterlife a lot more than the life here, the current life on earth. And it was such a big push in my family. We had cousins that came in the 80s, a little bit older than us, and they would look at us like we were spoiled because, you know, they said, what a wasted opportunity. You guys don't care about education. You guys don't work hard. And looking back years later, every time I run into Ivy League people or people who made it to big schools, it always, you know, rubs me in such a regretful. There's nothing I could have done about that because at the time, but I look back and I do the comparison of like, you know, những người mới qua đó, it always felt that the drive and the determination, when they were given that opportunity, they took it and they really ran with it in most cases.
Yeah. What I found is that in the early years, those of us who arrived in the early years, our drive to succeed and survive was so much stronger.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that people these days are less driven, right? Some are not. Because these days, even with my son's generations, you know, they have other options. At that time, we had no options.
Correct.
Either get it or die. Do it or die. So that's why, we went all in. I remember we were so poor that we were constantly behind in paying rent, to the point that I wanted to drop out of school to flip burgers full time. And I wrote to my grandfather in Vietnam, and he said he's the one who gave us the sense of value, the value on education, He said, no, don't do it. You're going to be poor together, but move forward together. Nobody can make up those lost years for you. So don't do it. And so I listened to him, and we moved forward. And, so we all got to college.
And then eventually you end up in Hong Kong as a Fulbright scholar, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
So my journey to, from escaping from Vietnam on a boat is really, really shaped my life journey later, right? So I left Vietnam in 1981 on a boat, 2 meter long, 10 meter wide, 2 meter wide, 10 meter long. There were 49 of us on the boat. And we drifted for about, we were on the ocean for about 5 nights and 4 days. We got chased by the pirates. We landed on a deserted island. We approached the Malaysian fishermen, and then we ran away from them because they wanted for the women and the children to dance for them. So we ran away, and then we landed on Malaysian shore. Didn't know where it was. The local police came, took us, and took us in, and then sent us to Pulau Bidong, which is the refugee camp. I remember when, as we got off the boat, I turned around and I saw people get out of the boat, and they used the hammer or whatever. They sank the boat right in front of my eyes. And that's when I said, oh no, how am I going to go back? So from that time on, I went to the refugee camp. And during the time I was on the island, I understood I experienced how it felt to be an orphan, because at that time my dad was in the US, my mom was in Vietnam. I'm on the road by myself. I was 16, my brother was 11. I have 2 cousins about my age, our age, 16 and 11. And when I went to say hey, bye-bye to my aunt, she said, oh, no. If you are leaving, I'm going to entrust you with my 2 daughters. So we had some of the relatives, but still, when you on the island in the refugee camp, you kind of like to have to survive by yourself. So I stayed in the camp for 4 months only, but those 4 months really ingrained in my mind, the dream. When I left the camp, I promised myself that I would go back just to bring hope to the people and the children. And so that's why when I got to college, and the summer between the junior and senior year in college, I applied for a fellowship from Yale, class 1956. They gave us money to do whatever that we've been dreaming about to do.
Wow.
And 2 of us got that. I went to work in the refugee camp in Hong Kong, and my classmate went to bar hopping in Ireland. So it's the kind of opportunities that Yale gave me that I really, really appreciate. And so from that summer experience, I applied to get the Fulbright to go back to work in the Vietnamese refugee camps in Hong Kong after I graduated from Yale.
What year did you go back to the refugee camps the first time from the class of 1956's donation?
That was the summer of 1988.
Okay, so the refugee camps were still in full force, right?
Yes. In 1989 and 90, when I went back for the Fulbright, 1980, 98 is where they started to do forced repatriation. That was 89, 90.
And who did you work with at these camps when you went back?
I worked in as a interpreter for the UNHCR representative in the camp.
And
And
what was it like?
it was very strange because on the one hand, I'm just an interpreter, but on the other hand, I'm everything that people counted on.
And
Every day.
And that was just you a few years before, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so that was a really big switch, right? And so from every day I travel from the island that I used to live on to go to the camp. That would take about 2 hours one way. And then I get there, the camp, the Shamshoepo camp in the summer, the first time I went there, is in the middle of the city with barbed wires around the camp, and then apartment buildings, skyrise around it. So we kind of like, we're looking like a zoo. People can look down on us, they see barbed wire, and that's where we are. And I remember there was one incident that really stayed with me. So one day, so I usually went into the camp on the weekends because I have nothing to do. So I went in, and that one day I went in, and I heard there was a big commotion. People were screaming, and right around the office, so the office is inside, out around it is all these fences all the way straight up. It's inside a warehouse, and you have the fence all the way straight up. And people were climbing on that fence. Wow. They were so aroused. They was just going crazy. They were screaming, do not hit him, do not kill him. It turned out that there was one man inside, inside the office, and he was beaten up. He was being beaten up pretty badly. And when I came in, they said, the crowd just saw me, and they said, "Oh, Quyen is here." And then immediately they went around me, right behind me, and kind of closed in right behind me and forced me to go forward. There's nowhere else I could go.
Wow.
So I was forced all the way up to the fence, and deep inside, I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing here? But I saw a man inside, and I was 24. I didn't know, I've never been, to war or anything like that. I've never seen anybody being beaten. So, but I took all of my courage, and I said, open the door for me and stop beating him. And so they said, no, who are you? This and this and that. And they won't open, the correctional department officers. And I said, open the door, or I'm going to have to report this to the UN. So they opened the door, and I went in, and I saw the man was hiding under the table, and he was like this under the table. And so after that, they let him go, and the crowd quieted down and dispersed. And then I went outside, and he followed me outside, and he said, "Miss, they gave me these pills, but I didn't dare to swallow." So he took out from his mouth, and he gave them to me, and I saw the word ibuprofen. So I said, no, it's okay. It's pain medication. And so that was the incident that I'm like, oh my God, I cannot back down. I didn't have the gut. If I had a choice, I probably would have backed down, but there was no choice. The crowd was right behind me. So that taught me a big lesson about, who I am, how much guts I have, and, how much it is that, the circumstances force you into doing something. That was pretty scary, actually.
That sounds scary. But
yeah.
What did they go after him for?
Okay, so in Hong Kong, those days, apparently some people sneaked out of the camps at night. Remember I told you the camp is in the middle of the city? They sneaked out, and every morning they took roll call, and they weren't there. They weren't there, so they got caught coming back in, and one of them just swore. He said it's just kind of like he said DM, but not to anybody per se. He would just say, but then the correctional officer, they were like, how dare you swear at me? And then they hit him. They beat him up.
Oh. And these were correctional officers that understood the Vietnamese, DM for, as a sign of, they understood it.
Yeah. I mean, some are, can speak both Cantonese and Vietnamese. And they know, when they do those kind of work, they know those special words very well.
So after you leave college, you don't go into humanitarian work right away, right? You do things that are money making and things that are going to produce a better life for you and your family, right?
So after I graduated from Yale, my mom was coming. So after the refugee camp, right? I went to, after I graduated from Yale, I took a year to do the Fulbright in the refugee camps. And then after that, my mom and my younger sister and grandmother were coming. So I had to go back and get a real job to support them. And the job at that time, it was very bad job market. So I got a job in an environmental consulting firm with Dip was there first, and she brought me in. So we worked. And then for 2 years or so, and then I decided to apply to go to Stanford Graduate School of Business. And then after Stanford, I took a little detour into the business world for about 4 or 5 years. And then I found out that I didn't really like it. I mean, I'm content. I do well, okay, but not well the way I wanted to, not with all my passion and all that. So that's when I realized that I need to go back to the nonprofit world, because that's where my heart really is.
Yeah, it's hard for me to comprehend that, because during that time, those years were so critical for Vietnamese to build wealth, and of your generation, that's a lot of things. And to go out and say, you know what, I'm going to segue and leave these, this amazing place that, I'm sure with an MBA from Stanford, undergrad from Yale, I'm so interested in the switch that goes from, that pursuing money and then switching right over to, nonprofit humanitarian work. That's very rare for the Vietnamese community to make that hard left into something like that.
Yeah, it's that's where the Buddhist foundation came in. It's just this sense of, because I was born into a Buddhist family. I grew up going to the temples, but I really did not really understand Buddhism until about 20 years ago, right? So until I'm 30 something. But at that time, when I was making the switch, to me, it's more like, if I have enough to eat, that's okay. I don't need to be rich. And it's, I guess in some ways you can call it, it's wired, it's in blood. It's just this gnawing discontent, this gnawing sense of not being passionate about it, about the work. That drives me nuts,
So then what happens when you start to have this realization? What steps do you take?
So at that time, I was married, and my husband then we were financially okay. That in 2000, when I got laid off from the startup, I was working at a startup that was doing voice over IP. right? Unfortunately, that one did not succeed, but many others succeeded, and voice over IP is now a reality, right? So but when I left that startup, that's when I realized that, hey, I'm just going to go back and really do things that I like. Because, at that time, I already have a son. I have a husband who can, who can help me with the finance. So we were not that rich. We are okay. So.
And so what did you do? What's the first thing you do?
So I so during the time that I was still working at the startup, I co-founded ICAN. And ICAN is, we give it a name, International Children Assistance Network. So there's international is US and Vietnam. Children is the children. Assistance, I wanted to give the children in Vietnam opportunities, the same kind of opportunities that I was given when I came to the States, to rise up and fulfill your dream in getting your education, so then you can really stand on your own feet, right? In Vietnam, getting education is key. So it's here in the US, but in Vietnam, much more so. So that's what I did. And then when I got laid off from the startup, that's when I went back and work full time on the nonprofit organization that I co-founded.
What was the hardest part in the beginning years?
You mean doing the nonprofit?
Yes, I can.
The hardest part, it was actually a lot of fun, because I had a lot of fun going to the temple, meeting all the people, because that nonprofit, one of the co-founders is Thầy Phát Trương. The other one is Chị Ivy. So she's also Buddhist. I'm also Buddhist. He's definitely Buddhist. He's a Buddhist monk. So ICAN was born in the basement of the Vuong temple, and we worked very hard. But we had a lot of love from all the people who come to the temple. They always say, "Hey, ăn cái này con. Hey, I have food for you." It's plenty. And so the temple became kind of like my second home. So I really, really enjoyed that.
And when you first started, did you focus more on the Vietnam side or the US side?
When I first started, it was all Vietnam. Because as a refugee, there is something in our psyche that we want to go back and give back, right? So ICAN was founded in the year 2000. In the year 2003, my son was born in 98. ICAN was founded 2000. 2003, I look at my son and I realize, he's growing up here, right? And I want him to retain the Vietnamese roots. But how do I do that exactly? How do I help him build the roots? So I realized that, focusing on Vietnam is not going to help him to build the cultural roots here. So I need to help build the cultural foundation for my son and his generations here in the US. And that's when I realized that, the Vietnamese community in America is the cultural foundation for the children. Like it or not. And with all the issues, with all the nuances, with all the bickering and all that's happening within the community, it is the cultural foundation for our children.
So your son.
So how do we make it?
So your son's 5 at this point, 2003, right?
Yeah.
And you're going back and forth a lot to Vietnam. Do you bring him with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as you're bringing him with you, he's becoming more, speaking probably Vietnamese a lot more because of people around him, right?
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
all these years later, and the questions I ask are, 90% because I go through this experience with my own 5-year-old. And I wonder, you look back years later, did it make an effect on his curiosity culturally to becoming more Vietnamese? that's a weird way to say it, but I don't mean more Vietnamese, but is he more curious about the Vietnamese culture after all these years?
He did for a while. So when he was about 8 years old, right? I took him to Vietnam multiple times, and it's so fun because I always go do humanitarian work, and that means in the trenches. So that means like going to villages and all that. And he's like, man, I'll go with you, but can we please stay in five-star hotels? It's too hot in Vietnam. It's coming from a kid, right? So I said, okay, how about if you do this, and this with me, and at the end of the trip, we'll go to a five-star hotel. But there was one time I remember he was 8, and we were eating inside inside a bánh cuốn, right? Bánh cuốn place. And there was a little kid about his age coming up to us, trying to sell the chewing gums. And I saw Khôi, his name, my son's name is Khôi. I saw Khôi went to ask how much is the chewing gum, and he came back, and he was all shaken. At first, I asked the kid how old you are, how he was, and why he's not in school. He said he has to sell chewing gum to make ends meet, right? So my son, I can see my son's hand was shaking because he realized that, somebody like him could be like that. So he asked me for some money and went buy the chewing gum. Then another year, 2 years later, we went back again, and he learned how to do twist animal balloons. He learned it online, and he did it. He went to Vietnam and he did animal balloons for all the children in the orphanages. So little things here and there. I think that kind of sowed the seeds in him. And then one time I interviewed him and my nephew. I said about being Vietnamese American. And so I said, Khôi was about 8, 9, and Minh was about 6 or 7, right? And I said, in what way are you Vietnamese? Just like the way you asked. And Minh said, it's in the food. And Khôi said, you dummy, it's in the blood. So that sense of, I think, the Vietnamese-ness, I think is still in him, even though later on when I got divorced, then his other side of the family is Caucasian. So he spent a lot, and then he went to school with Caucasians. So he become very Americanized, but I think deep inside he still has the roots. I hope so.
I asked that because I find myself so addicted is not the word, so attracted, so focused on this whole meaning of what does it mean to be Vietnamese. I just finished The Bronze Drum, written by Vuong. It's a new release book about the Trung sisters. And we were, in the story, it's a fictionalized version inspired obviously by true events. But we could have been Chinese, right? We could have been conquered by France. We could have been conquered by all these other countries, but we're still Vietnamese, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a really strange thing. The more and more you think about it, right? Especially the relationship with the Chinese, because it was such a close thing all the time. I mean, they could have just swallowed us whole so many times, and it really never happened. And we're still the Vietnamese. And that idea of hundreds of years later, almost 1,000 years later, we're still Vietnamese. Now, what I worry about all the time, and it afflicts me, is in another 100 years, when we're all melting, in the United States, it's a melting pot. Okay, that's fine. But in Vietnam, and then that relationship, that distance between the diaspora and the Vietnam, I always wonder what the mechanics of all of this will be, and who we turn out to be, and the borders, the cultural borders, the cultural separation with people like Khoi and myself. And I want it so bad not to diminish and go away. And that's why I do this work. It's just so important to hear the way that you think and the history of your life. And you're one of the building blocks of the tapestry of the Vietnamese, and how beautiful the culture truly is. And we're just one of hundreds of other cultures on earth, but we just happen to be Vietnamese and we're still here. And so it's an important thing to document and listen, for me to hear your story.
You know, actually, I agree with you. The story of the Jung sisters, they are really heroes to me. You know, I remember them, and I remember, and here's one thing that I just found out that I never knew all these years. Right, there is another Quang Trung Nguyen, right? He's a king who fought and conquered and who fought and kicked out the Chinese. And he is well known for an expeditious journey from the south to the north and kicked them out and took over Thăng Long the 5th day of the new year and stuff like that. I heard that story times before, but what I did not know is that time the Chinese king was Càng Long, who was what's his English name? Vua Càng Long, Chén Long. Okay, so the Qing dynasty, the last dynasty of China, there are two famous kings, the Kang He and Càng Long. And they're so famous. I really admire them, and I like, whoa, cool. But I did not know that Quang Trung succeeded in kicking them, and in fighting back. It was Càng Long, because Càng Long was awesome.
I mean, you think about it, right? China is like the United States. Vietnam is like Mexico.
Or even smaller.
Even smaller, right?
Yeah.
And how does it manage to retain its sovereignty and its identity for those hundreds of years?
That is definitely one of our sources of pride of being Vietnamese, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely
definitely
amazing. Now, when you go,
I mean, on the other hand, having said that, my last name is Vuong. My last name is Vuong, which is a Chinese last name. So my ancestors, China. So
that's another issue that I deal with internally, because as I'm listening to the bronze drum, the story, it's talking about kicking out the Han all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when you say the word Han Viet, right? When you say that in Vietnamese, it's like, we're talking about Chinese Vietnamese. We're talking about the language of Han, and you break a lot of the words Mandarin to Vietnamese, and a lot of words are linked the same way the Roman Latin alphabet or Latin language is tied into the English or current American, or even closer is Latin and Spanish or Latin and Italian. And it's the same with, analyzing the Chinese Mandarin and the Hang. And so I, like you, I share Chinese genetics as well. My great-grandfather was pure Chinese, but my identity is Vietnamese. So when I was just talking to another friend of mine, when I hear that the Jung sisters so adamantly were after killing the Chinese, the Han, it's just, some part of me is just like, you're trying to find the humanity in all of it, where we're kind of all the same people, but we're very different as well.
True. I identify myself as Vietnamese, even though I carry a Chinese last name, but somehow I grew up identifying myself as Vietnamese.
Yes, and
it's probably because my grandparents don't speak Chinese, so it's like
right,
several generations above.
And a lot of Vietnamese kids here probably will, in the next generation, will probably identify themselves as American and not Vietnamese.
Right. Well, that much is true. Now, the question is, how do you help them cultivate the cultural identity so that will make them feel stronger, richer, happier, knowing who they are?
that is definitely a valid concern. And that's something I actually want to get into in a bit with, your mental health work, because I know that that's like a big component. But before we get to that, with ICAN, when you were first going back to kind of identify students to help, what were the criteria of students that your organization would help?
You mean in Vietnam?
In Vietnam, sorry.
Yeah, so basically we were looking for students who are from poor families, who are single mom, like single mom families, and then also those who have more siblings, because the chance if there are more children in the house, there are more chances that the big kids will have to drop out of school to take care of the young kids, so parents can go to work. And so if we find those situations, we will help them we help them like $50, $75 a year, not a whole lot. Wow. But just do something to help them stay in school.
I mean, did that make an impact? $75 for the year?
Well, I like to think it did. Actually, I think a lot of kids actually appreciate that, and parents appreciate that, because especially around back to school time, they have no money. Right? Money, because in Vietnam, you have to pay for tuition, for books, for uniforms, all kinds of money that come in at once. So it does help.
And that leads me to this question, which is, whatever money that you made, the pot that you had, you could do it two ways. You could give $75, which is not a lot, to a lot of students, or you could do, let's say, $500 for one student. How do you make that decision in that kind of disbursement model?
So we did consider that, and we did do both. By the time those kids went up to college time, then we have to up the ante, and we have to give them like $500 a year or $1,000 a year, depending on which college they go to. So we have we've been doing college scholarships for over 10 years now. And, we have doctors, dentists, teachers, lawyers, all kinds, engineers graduating from college because of the help of our scholarship. Now, when we give, we don't give so much to cover everything. We help a portion. So imagine a student going to medical school in Saigon, right? Obviously, $1,000 a year is not going to be enough. But that helped them. And also they tell us that emotionally, it gives them a lot of hope and confidence, because somebody else, a stranger, believes in them enough to give them that money. Even though, they still have to, they go to work at, mấy cái quán cơm, the restaurant.
Yeah. So
then they can have food to eat as well. And then they go to school and they work really hard to achieve their dream of attending college.
One thing that I study and I think about quite a bit as I compare like Taiwan or Japan after the war is that the hunger level of the youth coming out of, một cái cảnh đói nghèo, it just propels the society for a good 20 to 30 years to really just break out and achieve, right? Like we see that in Taiwan post the 50s, where they became the superpower in manufacturing and in their corner. And I feel like right now that's what's happening in Vietnam. Mấy đứa mà đi học quán, and working at the quán cơm, the very thing that you just described is sort of what's Vietnamese society right now is going through. And I think they have a good, I don't know, maybe 10 years left of this hungry nature until the middle class rises to the point where their kids, their second generation of middle class, loses that hunger. And
it's the same process as us coming to America, right? Yeah. Yeah. So in my years, it was just like do or die. But my son, I don't think so. I don't
No,
think he experiences that, even though he works really hard and he's self-driven and all that, but it's from a different perspective.
it really is. It really is.
Yeah.
And finding that as a parent is sort of hard to navigate sometimes because you kind of want them to go at least above and beyond you, right?
Right. Right.
What
Yeah.
do they say?
So, there comes there is the struggle
Yeah.
to raise the children in two cultures,
Mhm.
right? I think at one time my son said something like, "Mẹ, I know you went through a lot, but then you don't want us to go through those hardship, do you?" Right? Of course we don't. But in some ways, it's the tough times that build the character, right? So I am strong and resilient the way I am today because of those years as a
Right.
refugees, right?
No, yeah.
But then I'm sure my son will have his moments, his years, his events in life that shape him, give him the drive and the strength and all that. We all do. But by and large, as a generation, you don't see that drive as strong as people, later years, they become more well established. If they come over from Vietnam and they have like a network of support already, system already, we didn't have those.
Hmm.
Even, in my years, it was like what I call the years where when nước mắm vẫn còn là nước muối. Back then, there was no nước mắm, and it was just, they called it nước mắm, but it was basically nước muối, right? Salt water. That's all there was.
Wow. Now, have you seen a transition from the early years in the 2000s with the students that you work with to today? Or is it still the hungry kids? Because poor people will be poor people, and the help that you give will still be as just as effective as it was in 2000 or in the late 90s.
I would say kind of the same, because poor people are still driven to rise up, right? And there was one girl who cried, and they made us cry, and they said, she said that she appreciated scholarship. She wanted to become a nurse and to come back to work in her village, because she said only, how did she say it? Chỉ có những người khổ mới biết nó khổ như thế nào. And so that's kind of like, and you will always, society in Vietnam, economically, it seems like it's getting better, but it's getting better not for the majority of the people, right? And so because of that, there are always poor people who are starving or craving for opportunities to finish school, to have an education so they can build their life.
You do a lot of humanitarian work, not humanitarian, community work in San Jose and where the area that you live in with mental health and that kind of work. How would you describe that kind of work locally where you have a center, I believe, right?
Mm. Oh, I forgot to tell you that, we also have the U.S. scholarship for Vietnamese American students in the U.S. And we focus on students who care to give back. And that's how we continue to nurture the spirit of giving back, paying forward, and all that. So in terms of mental health, I realized, so I got my MBA from Stanford, 1994. Then I went back to get my MSW, Master of Social Work, from San Jose State in 2017. Because what I realized is that there's so much mental health in our community. It's hidden, it's buried, it's pervasive, it's everywhere, right? And it's to the point where, in the name of peace, people in the family don't talk about it, but generations grow apart that way. just so they don't argue. They shut up, they don't talk, they don't argue, but they went separate ways. The grandparents, the parents, the children. And it's all because of mental health.
Well, mental health is sort of like a technology to me, right? It really is. It's like tools. And you could be stuck in the Bronze Age, you could be stuck in the whatever age, Industrial Revolution. There's different stratas to the language of mental health. And for some reason, when the idea of mental health comes into our community, especially with my mom, in the early years, about maybe while I was talking about this, I was in therapy for 7 years. And she was like, "You're not crazy. Why do you need to go see a therapist?" I said, "Because there's a language there that I want to learn." And it really is. It's a language, a technology that I wanted to pick up for myself, short of going to school. I wanted to see why I was unhappy. I wanted to see why I was depressed. I wanted to see what made me happy. So 7 years with the therapist that I paid a lot of money for, it resolved a lot of things and made me see things. But we are not liberated from this idea of being crazy in our community.
Yeah, mental health is a very controversial word, right? In our community, mental health is actually a spectrum, right? And at the light end of the spectrum, if you have stress and the stress level goes to gets to the point where it disrupts your daily routines, then you have mental health. All of us have mental health. It's just a matter of how can you manage it, right? Can you, and then three things that I keep telling people, ICAN, our agency, we focus on outreach and community education and awareness. So we tell people that three things you should watch yourself. Number one, are you still eating and sleeping normally? Are you still functioning, going to work or going to school normally? Do you have a friend in whom you can confide? Because if you have those three things, then you can manage. That means you can manage your mental health. It's mental health that, and the heavy end of the spectrum is all the schizophrenia and all of those psychotic features, conditions. But our community keeps on thinking the mental health is on the heavy side of it.
Right.
And that's why I keep telling people that no, we all have it. So my dream in working in bringing a mental health awareness to the community is that one day people can look at mental health as just catching a cold. Hey, I run into a tough time. I have stress. Okay, I get out of it. I go get help. I get out of it. But the way we function, which is like, don't air dirty laundry.
Yeah.
So we keep it inside and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
And I think there's a cultural clash between Vietnam and Confucian society and really the way we operate in the US mentally. It's just two very different approaches to living. And I think that it's always been a difficult road to navigate. I think from politics to religion to all of the mechanics that happen in the family and society between Vietnamese and Vietnamese American cultures.
Yeah, and generationally, there are differences too, right? I have one of my board members, he's young, and he has a therapist as part of his guru team to help him figure out how to keep a balanced life, how to do better at work, this and this and that. Just like you said, you go to a therapist to see how to keep yourself happy.
It's like a coach.
It's like a coach, right? If you seek help early on, it's like a coach. But then if you don't, then it goes down the wrong path and it gets worse and worse. Then it's a different story.
But it's so murky to enter the waters, like to explain to my uncle who, came here as a teenager, worked his whole life here in America. And, even the communication between an open mind person like him to his kids there's no communication. They've given up. And the kids are in their mid-20s now, and he's a fun guy. My uncle is a fun guy, and I really like hanging out with him. But at the same time, there are very clear women are not equal to men. Those kinds of modules, those kinds of taboo, in the American society, that's ridiculous thinking. But he still harbors and carries that mode. And there's no way that people, even I'm close to him in age than his children, for me to even change the way he looks at the world. It's impossible. And at some point, politically, we just have to cut each other off. We just don't, and there's no changing it. No matter how much dialogue and how much love I give him, we cannot talk about our politics. We just can't have a fair fight. We can't have a fair discussion. Because it's just so, and I'm willing, I'm malleable, I'm open to discussion, and I'm not going to fire back with anger, but this is what's happening, and I think it's and I think my uncle and I have a mild form of the generational gap, but when it comes to him and his kids, it's severe. There's no communication.
Yeah, that's unfortunately that is the reality for many Vietnamese families. I did not know this because it didn't happen to my dad, but there are families out there who are telling me now that the husband, the grandpa, the still screaming at night, and gets and couldn't sleep, and because of all the PTSD.
Yeah.
So it's a lot worse than we think, but because we don't know, I mean, coming from my family, I did not understand. So basically, when I went back to school to do mental health, that helps me to understand my dad and his generations a lot better. Because before that, I used to think, well, don't they have anything better to do than to demonstrate all the time? But then as I grew older, I realized that, all the angst and all the issues that they have to deal with, inside them, that's really, really difficult for them. And I did not understand when I was younger because it didn't happen to me.
Right. And that is their identity.
Yes. And there is one more thing that they said that I appreciated, which is they said they fight for free human rights in Vietnam because they felt like it was their obligation to help their comrades who they left behind. That's definitely PTSD. You come back from a war. Why did I survive and not my comrades, right? Not my friends. So that's that. Then I understood, okay, it is PTSD. It is mental health. And that's when I think that if we all get together, we can try to find a way to address this issue.
At the end of the day, I'm not arguing one way or another, but my question is it worth it at this point?
Well, think of it this way. If it's your father or grandfather, what do you say?
Well, neither one of those are still alive. And even when they were here, I can probably answer no. It was probably not worth it. When I look back on my life with my father, it certainly was not worth it. Although he wasn't too ideological, he was more of an artist, so I didn't have to. Even though he was in he was in the military and all of that, but he lived a much more intellectual and academic kind of existence and art and free thinking. So I didn't have to really contend with him. But if you ask me, is it worth it to really work this out with my uncle and the living guys, the guys that are like, the guys who are young puppies when they got here, and now they're like entrenched in the way they think, it's not worth it. Because, every time I see them twice a year, I want it to be a very happy and festive occasion where the younger ones don't agree with me. My younger cousins don't, they won't come. It's just the way it goes now. It's hard. It's hard. Is it worth trying?
Well, I still continue to try because, I don't want to give up on my dad and his generations. Yeah, my dad called me communist every time I don't allow him to do something. Let's say he likes to go buy the lottery tickets, and I said, no, you can't go. Oh, you communist.
So funny.
So, things like that.
Vừa khóc vừa cười, right? For me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that right now having conversation with you about this is wonderful, and being able to breathe and air it out is a wonderful thing. It's so funny. I just saw recently a post. My cousin's about 5 or 6 years younger than me. She's a pro fighter, a pro MMA fighter. And she's up against her opponent in the little Facebook ads and posts that she posts. And in the one girl's, she's from, I think, Panama or Brazil or somewhere. And in my cousin, I mean, she was born in the United States. There's a red flag with a star, And I was so blown away. I don't think that she did that. I think the promoters did that, to create this national divide or this rivalry. But it's 2 flags. And today, when I think about that, all of that is like going to be completely normalized in about 10 years from now, right? If a young Vietnamese fighter, he's 25, 10 years from now, he's 15 or 12 years old right now, he goes up to fight on the national stage of the United States MMA, whatever, UFC. They're going to represent the red flag with the yellow star. And, that generation, that your father and my father, they're gone. And that's something, I think that we're going to be the older ones at that time. And the mental health behind that is going to be another interesting issue to me.
Yeah, I think time will impose on us certain force and pressure that we can't fight back, right? I thought about this, and that's why part of my thinking about building the cultural identity is to help our children and grandchildren understand where they came from, how they got here, because this is a melting pot. I want to make sure that they know how they got here. So that's why one of my lifelong dreams, well, first of all, we focus on helping parents raise children in 2 cultures, right? And the parents said that, you get the best of both worlds. What more do you want? But they don't realize the best of both worlds collide, conflict, right? Right. So every day, when they go to school, they are encouraged to speak up to speak their own mind. But when they're at home, không được home, right? Speaking up your own mind is home and not allowed, all that. So it's really hard. And one of my first staff, Nguyen, she said, she told me, "Chị Quyen, when I cross oceans every time I walk through that door." When she was going to high school, and she was valedictorian, but that's the struggle that she went through. And so what we are trying to do is to help parents and grandparents understand, reflect on their parenting experience in Vietnam, and help them understand how parenting is expected here and how the culture works here, how life works here, so that they can really support their children. And one of my lifelong dreams is to, I don't know if this is going to be politically, whatchamacallit?
Incorrect.
Controversial. But what I really wanted is for the month of April to be recognized locally, permanently, and nationally, legally, permanently and nationally as the Vietnamese American History Month. Just like May is the Asian American Month. Because there's so many things that tie with the month of April, and April is really the birth of the Vietnamese American community in the U.S.
How do you make that happen?
I don't know how it's going to happen,
No,
but
no, no.
that
I
I
mean that
think
on a
I think
mechanical
if that
level.
can be done, that will anchor. Hmm?
I, I I meant, how do you make that happen on a mechanical level? Like, what do you do? Do you apply for it? Do you get petitions signed? How does that work?
Well, so basically, if we can get that recognition, then that will anchor the older generation. No, that will honor the older generations and anchor the younger generations. So what I'm thinking is, if we can go get the county, let's say California and Texas are the two big states, right? And then the county with the largest Vietnamese population, if they can get the county and the state to acknowledge, to recognize, and kind of sign it into law or something, to recognize the month of April as Vietnamese American History Month, then that will, eventually then we will go up to national.
I like that. I like that idea a lot.
But I don't know how to do it, so I'm going to need a lot of help.
But we speak it into the universe to allow it to take place one day. It would
Right.
be interesting because at that point, what does that month mean to the people in Vietnam?
Um, I don't know. It's, to me, of course, in Vietnam they celebrate the victory and all that. But to me, that month, yes, there was a lot of destruction and death and pain and sufferings during the month of April in 1975. But it's through that pain, it's through those sufferings and the destruction that the younger generations rise up. My parents' generations brought us to shore, to American shore, and give us the life that, with freedom and liberty and all that, and democracy. And that's why I feel like, Vietnamese Americans is kind of like the image of the phoenix rising from the ashes
Mm.
of their ancestors. So I don't care what they say in Vietnam, but to me, the month of April means a lot to Vietnamese American because it is the birth of Vietnamese American community in the U.S.
That's a segue for me into asking, where do you spend most of ICANN's energy and sort of opportunities or time between Vietnam and the U.S. now? Because ICANN seems to help with students in Vietnam and help with the community here. How do you proportion the two geographies?
So right now, I would say that our focus is more on in the U.S. on helping the community here raise the next generations of caring leaders. Right, we want to make sure that our children are happy, healthy, and doing well. Vietnam, there's still some of us, a small portion of ICANN that still focus on helping the children in Vietnam, but it is a means to an end in the sense that helping doing humanitarian work in Vietnam will help some of the Vietnamese Americans here feel happy and feel like they bring meaning to their life. So before, when I first started ICANN, my focus was in Vietnam. But afterwards, when I look at it again, then I said, we got to focus here. And Vietnam, doing humanitarian work in Vietnam is a means to an end. It comes back to improve, enhance, enrich the life of Vietnamese Americans.
Wonderful. That makes so much sense. Chị Quyen, today, we covered a lot and things that I didn't even prepare. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time that you spent. And I do want to say that this is in English, and I would like to get back on very soon to do a Vietnamese episode with you so we can discuss things that, sometimes it takes our episodes in very different directions. So hopefully you're open to that. And I just want our audience to know that a Vietnamese episode will come. And so maybe the people that listen to this could allow their parents to hear the mental health issue, because I think we're going to probably focus a lot more on that in the Vietnamese episode.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kenneth.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. The Vietnamese is produced by Brittany Tran. Special thanks to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe, like, and comment. Please rate and give us a review wherever you find our podcasts. Thanks again for listening.